Picture this. A Tuesday morning. A bank branch in Southwest Florida opens for business like any other day. Coffee's brewing. Tellers are counting cash. And then, the sheriff walks through the front door. Behind him, 2 moving trucks, a crew with dollies, and one ordinary 60-year-old man, holding a piece of paper that says he now has the legal right to take everything inside. The desk, the computers, the cash in the drawers, all of it. See, this man had done everything right. Worked for 30 years. Paid his mortgage on time, every single month. And when he finally paid it off, the bank told him he still owed them $250,000. They tried to take his home. They picked the wrong guy. This is the saga of a regular man who didn't blink, didn't fold, and didn't stop until he had the sheriff emptying a bank's vault into the back of a U-Haul. And every word of it is true. Welcome to the archives.
Look, I'm not a complicated guy. My name's Warren. I'm 60 years old. I spent 32 years installing and repairing commercial HVAC systems. You know, the big units on top of office buildings and hospitals. Not glamorous work. Hot, loud, and it destroyed my knees. But it paid the bills. And for 25 years, one of those bills was my mortgage. Every single month. On the dot. $1,247 and some change to First American National Bank. For 25 years. That's 300 payments. I kept every single receipt. Every canceled check. I'm the kind of guy who keeps records, okay? My wife Susan jokes that when I die, they're gonna find filing cabinets in my coffin. Anyway. May 2009. I make my final payment. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I got a little emotional. Susan and I sat on the back porch that night with a bottle of champagne. Not the expensive stuff. We're talking $14 from Publix. But it tasted like victory. I looked at her and I said, "That's it. We own this house. Nobody can take it from us now." I believed that. I really did. 6 months later, I get a letter. It's from First American National Bank. And at first, I figure it's just some promotional garbage, you know, congrats on paying off your mortgage, now take out a home equity line of credit. Banks love to do that. But that's not what this was. The letter said I was behind on my mortgage. Not a little behind. Way behind. Like, they were claiming I still owed them the entire balance. We're talking $197,000. I read it 3 times. I called Susan in. She read it twice. We looked at each other like maybe one of us was having a stroke. I called the bank the next morning. Spent 2 hours on hold. Got transferred 4 times. Finally talked to some guy in a call center who sounded like he was reading from a script. He said their records showed no final payment. No payoff. As far as their system was concerned, I still owed the full balance and I was in default. I said, "That's impossible. I have every receipt. Every canceled check. I can prove I paid." And this guy, I'll never forget this, he says, "Sir, our system is the official record. I'd recommend you consult with a legal professional." Then he hung up on me. 2 weeks later, I got the foreclosure notice. They were taking my house. The house I built my life in. The house I raised my kids in. The house I had paid for in full.
Now, most people, when they get a letter like this from a bank, they panic. They assume they made a mistake somewhere. They assume the massive institution with thousands of employees and billions of dollars must know something they don't. But Warren wasn't most people. Warren kept receipts.
So I did what Susan told me to do. I went to the filing cabinet. I pulled out every single piece of paper related to that mortgage. 25 years of statements. 25 years of canceled checks. I had the payoff letter. I had the confirmation from the title company. I even had a note from some bank employee named Denise congratulating me on becoming a valued free and clear homeowner. I spread it all out on the dining room table, and I took pictures of everything. Then I started calling lawyers. And this is where I learned something about the legal system. Most lawyers didn't want to touch this case. Why? Because going up against a bank costs money. A lot of money. And banks have legal teams whose entire job is to bury guys like me in paperwork until we give up or go broke. I talked to 4 different attorneys. 2 of them flat out said, "You'll spend more fighting this than the house is worth." One of them told me to just negotiate with the bank and see if they'll accept a reduced settlement. A reduced settlement. For a mortgage I already paid off. You believe that? The 4th guy, though. His name was Todd Allen. Small practice. Operated out of a strip mall between a nail salon and a sandwich shop. I'm not kidding. Todd was maybe 45. Looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His office was a mess. Papers everywhere. But when I showed him my documents, something changed in his eyes. He flipped through the canceled checks. He read the payoff letter. He looked at the foreclosure notice. And then he leaned back in his chair and said, "Warren, the bank screwed up. And they're betting you don't have the guts to prove it." I hired him on the spot. Gave him a $3,500 retainer, which was most of my savings at that point. And we went to war. Now, here's the thing about fighting a bank. They don't fight fair. Their lawyers bill by the hour, and they got a lot of hours to burn. They file motion after motion. They request extension after extension. They bury you in discovery requests. The bank's legal team was some fancy firm out of Tampa. 6 attorneys on the case. 6. For a retired HVAC guy from Naples. And I could tell from the first hearing, they thought this was a joke. One of them, this guy in a $2,000 suit, actually smirked at Todd when we walked in. Like we were wasting his time. They filed a motion to dismiss. Said I had no standing and that the bank's records were definitive. Todd responded with 312 pages of documentation. Every check. Every statement. Every letter. Their motion got denied. Then they tried to delay the trial. Claimed they needed more time to investigate. Judge gave them 30 days. 30 days later, they asked for another extension. Judge denied it. I could see them getting nervous. They weren't used to this. They were used to people folding. People settling. People giving up. I wasn't giving up.
There's an old saying in legal circles, the one with the most paperwork wins. The bank had lawyers. Warren had receipts. And in a courtroom, receipts don't lie.
The day of the trial, I wore my only suit. Bought it for my daughter's wedding in 2004. Still fit, mostly. Susan ironed my shirt twice because I was sweating through it. We got to the courthouse early. Todd was already there, looking like he'd been up all night. Probably had been. The bank's lawyers showed up in a black Escalade. I counted 5 of them. All suits. All looking at their phones. They barely glanced at me. The courtroom was quiet. Just us, the bank's team, a court reporter, and the judge. Her name was Judge Kathleen Roberts. Older woman, maybe late 60s. She had a look on her face like she'd seen a lot of nonsense in her career and wasn't interested in seeing more. The bank's lead attorney went first. He stood up there like he was doing everyone a favor by even being present. Talked about how the bank's internal records were the official record, how I had failed to provide adequate proof of payment through proper channels, how this was all just a misunderstanding that could have been avoided if I'd worked with the bank instead of pursuing unnecessary litigation. I wanted to stand up and yell. Susan squeezed my hand under the table so hard I thought she'd break my fingers. Then Todd got up. He walked to the bench, calm as could be, and handed the judge a binder. Not a small one. This thing was 3 inches thick. He said, "Your Honor, inside this binder is documentation of every single payment my client made on his mortgage over a 25-year period. Canceled checks, bank statements, and written confirmation from First American National Bank acknowledging receipt of his final payoff." He let that hang for a second. Then he said, the bank claims their internal records don't show these payments. But their records are not reality. These are reality. The judge flipped through the binder for what felt like an hour but was probably 10 minutes. The bank's lawyers were whispering to each other. One of them looked genuinely nervous for the first time. Finally, Judge Roberts looked up. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, but this is pretty close, counsel for the bank, can you explain to me why your client initiated foreclosure proceedings against a homeowner who appears to have documented proof of every payment, including the final payoff? The lead attorney stood up and started talking about system errors and procedural oversights. He said the bank was willing to drop the foreclosure and apologize for the inconvenience. Inconvenience. He called it an inconvenience. The judge was not impressed. She ruled in my favor. Full dismissal of the foreclosure. And she ordered the bank to pay my attorney's fees and court costs, $2,534. That was it. We won. I shook Todd's hand. Susan was crying. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in 18 months. And I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't.
See, the bank had a choice. They could pay the $2,534, admit they were wrong and move on. But that's not what banks do. Banks are institutions. Institutions have egos. And this institution decided that paying a court-ordered judgment to some retired HVAC guy from Naples was beneath them. They ignored it.
5 months. That's how long the bank sat on that judgment. Todd sent letters. He called their legal team. He filed follow-up motions. Nothing. Radio silence. It was like they thought if they ignored us long enough, we'd go away. Now, I'll be honest with you. Part of me wanted to let it go. It was $2,534. Not exactly life-changing money. Susan even said, Warren, we won. We kept the house. Maybe just let it be. But I couldn't. This wasn't about the money anymore. This was about principle. This was about a giant corporation thinking they could steamroll a regular person and face no consequences. So I told Todd to do whatever it took. He said, Warren, are you sure? Because what I'm about to do, they're not gonna like it. I said, good. Todd filed for a writ of execution. Now, for those of you who don't know, a writ of execution is a court order that allows a creditor, that's me now, technically, to seize the assets of a debtor, that's the bank, to satisfy an unpaid judgment. In plain English, if they won't pay you, you can take their stuff. The judge approved it. And on a Tuesday morning in June, I pulled into the parking lot of the First American National Bank branch on Pine Ridge Road in Naples, Florida. Behind me was Todd in his Honda Civic. Behind him was a county sheriff's deputy in a cruiser. And behind him were 2 moving trucks with a crew of 4 guys. I wish I could describe to you the look on the bank manager's face when we walked through the front door. Her name was Patricia. Mid-50s, I'm guessing. Blonde hair, reading glasses on a chain. She saw the sheriff's badge first, then the writ in Todd's hand, then the moving crew behind us with dollies and hand trucks. She said, I'm sorry, what is happening right now? Todd handed her the writ and said, Ma'am, your employer owes my client $2,534 pursuant to a court judgment. They have refused to pay. We're here to collect. Patricia went pale. She said she needed to call corporate. Todd said, You're welcome to do that. In the meantime, we'll start with the furniture. The moving guys started unplugging computers. One of them grabbed a rolling chair and wheeled it toward the door. A teller, young kid, maybe 22, just stood there with his mouth open. Patricia was on the phone, almost yelling. I caught bits and pieces, I don't care what time it is in Tampa, get someone here now. The sheriff's deputy stood by the door, calm as could be. I asked him later if he'd ever done anything like this before. He laughed and said, first time for everything. They moved fast. Desks. Monitors. A potted plant. Someone grabbed the coffee maker from the break room. I'm not gonna lie, watching that coffee maker go out the door, I almost laughed out loud. Then Todd walked toward the teller line. Patricia stepped in front of him. You can't take cash. That's theft. Todd said, "Ma'am, the writ allows for seizure of all assets necessary to satisfy the judgment. That includes cash on hand." I swear to you, her face went through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds. That's when the front door slammed open. A guy in a gray suit came running in. He was sweating. Tie crooked. He looked like he'd driven 90 miles an hour to get there. He said, "Stop. Everyone stop. I'm from the bank's legal department." He looked around at the half-empty branch. At the moving trucks visible through the window. At the sheriff. At me. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a check. He handed it to Todd. Todd looked at it, then looked at me. "It's for $2,534, Todd said. Certified." I looked at that check for a long moment. And I know this sounds petty, but I wanted to say no. I wanted to make them unload everything. I wanted to watch them set up those desks again while I stood there with my arms crossed. But Susan was in the car outside. And I knew she'd tell me to take the win and go home. So I nodded. Todd called off the movers. They put everything back, slowly, I noticed. The bank's lawyer stood there watching, not saying a word. When we walked out, Patricia was still standing behind the counter. She didn't look at me. I got in my truck, and Susan asked, "Is it over?" I said, "Yeah. It's over."
Warren never asked for any of this. He just wanted to pay off his house and live in peace. The bank tried to take that from him. And when he fought back and won, they figured they could ignore him. Because that's what institutions do. They count on you giving up. But Warren didn't give up. He walked into a bank with a sheriff and moving trucks and made them write a check on the spot. Not because he needed the $2,534, but because sometimes the principle matters more than the principle. The story made local news, then national news. People called Warren a hero. He didn't feel like one. He told a reporter, "I just wanted what was fair." The bank, by the way, never issued a public apology. They released a statement calling it a regrettable clerical error, and said they were reviewing internal procedures. But here's what I know. Somewhere in that bank's corporate office there's a memo. And that memo says, when a customer has documentation, pay attention. Because the next guy might show up with a moving truck. And that's the lesson, isn't it? Keep your receipts. Know your rights. And never assume that the size of your opponent determines the outcome of the fight. Until next time, stay documented.